Happy New Year to all of YouTube, and welcome to Season 2 of Sean Bradley Reviews. It is the beginning of 2018, meaning that it is February, which technically is still the beginning. And it is also the beginning of another year in cinema. We all have hopes and desires for the future, and I plan to make the most of it and make 2018 the best year ever. So, to kick things off, I'm going to be reviewing the autobiographical drama All the Money in the World, directed by Ridley Scott and starring Michelle Williams, Mark Wahlberg, and not starring Kevin Spacey. The film tells the true story of the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III, or Paul, played by Charlie Plummer, in Rome of 1973. Paul was kidnapped by a criminal organisation led by Cinquanta, played by Romain Duris. He contacts Paul's mother, Gail Harris, played by Michelle Williams, to pay their ransom demand of $17 million. Gail goes to her former father-in-law, the oil tycoon Jean Paul Getty, played by Christopher Plummer, who refuses to pay the ransom and assigns his oil negotiator, Fletcher Chase, played by Mark Wahlberg, to help Gail to find Paul. But as the case drags on and the kidnappers begin to lose patience, it's a race against time to get Paul back safe and sound. I've seen most of Ridley Scott's films. He is one of the most celebrated filmmakers still working today, making such iconic films as Alien, Blade Runner, and Gladiator. However, Scott's quality as a filmmaker had been declining in the later years from the perspectives of the viewing public. Don't get me wrong, I liked his Alien prequels such as Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I enjoyed Exodus: Gods and Kings, despite being known for his epic and CGI blockbusters. Scott is versatile and efficient as a director. Let's talk about his direction on this film. This film starts out with Paul walking the streets of Rome in a black and white shot before switching to colour. The black and white section, according to Scott, was inspired by Federico Fellini's La Dolce Vita. Scott, as a filmmaker who is in his 80s, has a lot of other sources to draw from. He previously worked as an art director before making his directorial debut with The Duelists. The first third of the film is great, setting up the history of the Gettys, and there are flashbacks that go into the history of Paul and how he came to Italy when his parents were hired to work for his grandfather's oil company. The second act can drag on a bit when it comes to Gail and the police sitting in her apartments, waiting by the phone and tracing the calls made by the kidnappers. The third and final act is where it begins to pick up when the ransom is eventually paid, and it's a matter of suspense as both Fletcher and Gail are trying to follow the instructions set by the kidnappers after their release of Paul. There's a scene in the film that is very bloody and may come off as just, in a way, maybe exploitative or controversial. It's not a big spoiler as it's implied in the trailer and is displayed on one of the film's posters. That is the scene where Cinquanta and a couple of his accomplices cut off Paul's ear and mail it to an Italian newspaper in a scene that puts Reservoir Dogs to shame. The cinematography of the piece is great, making the locations in Italy look exotic, and putting you in mind of the Hitchcock thrillers from the 60s. The editing of the film is great, considering that this film was quickly re-edited, but we'll get to all of that later. Now on to the performances. Michelle Williams does an excellent performance as Gail Harris. Her accent seems very elegant and classy. She does a good job at portraying the kinds of emotions that a mother would go through when hearing that her son has been kidnapped. She tries time and time again to persuade Getty to pay the ransom. She has no money and is living a working class lifestyle after the divorce of her husband. You can see the struggle that she is going through. However, there is one flaw here. There is a flashback scene where Jean Paul Getty presents her son, Paul, with a present that looks very valuable in front of Gail, but actually it was a trinket from a gift shop that costs around $11. Then later on in the film, she tries to sell that trinket to a museum for money to pay the ransom, only for the curator to tell her that it's worthless. It would have worked if she didn't know beforehand that this priceless item would be worthless, but in the flashback, Gail was within earshot of Getty when he told them this. He was practically sitting in front of her, conversing to the whole family when he said this. Mark Wahlberg plays Fletcher Chase, who works for Jean Paul Getty as an advisor and was a former CIA operative. Wahlberg does a good job in this film. He still comes off as his usual self. There are times where he's facing off against Getty and he is giving it his all. Charlie Plummer as Paul Getty is very good, portraying his character as a person who is very confident and self-loving at the beginning, following in the ways of his drug-addled father and becoming a burnt-out hippie. When he gets kidnapped, there are hints of vulnerability in his performance, and he forms a friendship with Cinquanta, played by Romain Duris, who is great in this film, becoming a little bit protective of Paul throughout the course of the film. And now we come to the elephant in the room. The character of Jean Paul Getty. For anyone who's been living under a rock for the past year, let me give you the skinny. After finishing Alien Covenant, Ridley Scott got started on this film. When he read the script, he saw Kevin Spacey in mind for the role of oil tycoon Jean Paul Getty. Last summer, Scott began principal photography on the film, with Spacey shooting his role in just 10 days. He was also a part of the film's marketing campaign, with the first trailer for the film released the coming September, building up Kevin Spacey's character, who appears decked out in prosthetic makeup to look like the elderly Jean Paul Getty. I watched the trailer then and thought that the film had looked interesting and had some thought-provoking ideas. All seemed fine and dandy for Spacey until October of 2017, when the New York Times and the New Yorker reported the dozens of accusations of sexual abuse by women aimed at film producer Harvey Weinstein, which have alleged to have happened over a period of at least 30 years. The scandal triggered many more accusations by men and women of other powerful men throughout the world, creating what is called the Weinstein effect. Many of our beloved actors and entertainers were accused of sexual misconduct, such as Dustin Hoffman, Jeremy Piven, and Louis C.K. On the 29th of October 2017, actor Anthony Rapp had alleged in an interview for BuzzFeed that Stacy had made unwanted sexual advances towards him when he was just 14 years old and when Stacy was 26. This resulted in a chain of events including not only with Ridley Scott replacing Stacy in this film with Christopher Plummer, but it also resulted in him being dropped by Netflix, fired from House of Cards, and having his Gore Vidal biopic cancelled whilst it was still in post-production, dropped by his talent agency, and to top it all off, Stacy trying to defuse the situation by giving us one of the most laughable and memorable excuses for child abuse that civilization has ever heard. Though Plummer had replaced Stacy in the role of J. Paul Getty, Stacy can still be seen in the film via wide shots that Scott couldn't reshoot with Plummer due to time and money constraints. After hearing the news that Kevin Spacey was going to be edited out of the film, which at the time had already been completed, done and dusted, in the can, locked, I was curious to see how the film was going to end up, and I thought that Scott and his crew did a great job. There is an early flashback that takes place in Saudi Arabia that shows Getty getting off of a train and being greeted by a number of Saudi businessmen. The scene begins with a wide shot filmed from far away, showing Getty, played by Stacy, whose face we cannot see, being helped off of the train before switching to a close-up shot of Getty, now played by Christopher Plummer. Christopher Plummer does an excellent job in the role of J. Paul Getty. He appears to be cold and commanding. The man is a bit of an a-hole for refusing to pay the ransom at first, but he has a sense of logic to why he refuses.
I have 14 grandchildren. If I start paying ransoms, I'll have 14 kidnapped grandchildren.
There was a bit in the trailer that I had liked with Getty talking to the press about how much he would pay for Paul's release. Comparing the two trailers, Stacy with his hard and icy
nothing,
undeniably tops Plummer's weak and grinning.
Nothing.
Even though Kevin Spacey looks like the animated version of Carl Pilkington if they put him in old man makeup, he shows just how cold J. Paul Getty can be. While Spacey, who was 58 at the time, filmed his scenes wearing prosthetics, Plummer is more believable as he was 88 during the reshoots, which is 5 years older than J. Paul Getty when he died. There are some parts where Plummer looks animated as if they just CG'd him in, like that final confrontation that he has with Mark Wahlberg. There are many times in this film where you can tell that some of these scenes are reshoots, like the shot of Getty taking off his sunglasses, which was obviously filmed with a green screen. I am not going to trash them for it. Ridley Scott is an efficient director and he was clearly putting his all into this. The crew were probably working their hardest and didn't want to live in the shadow of one man's actions. Ridley Scott has shown a great example of averting away from controversy, with the BBC following in his footsteps by replacing disgraced actor Ed Westwick, who had been accused by 3 women of rape and sexual assault, with Christian Cook in their TV adaptation of Agatha Christie's Ordeal by Innocence. The story of the kidnapping of John Paul Getty III is also being depicted in the FX anthology series Trust, directed by Danny Boyle, and airing in March 2018. All the Money in the World has received glowing reviews from critics. It is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, was nominated for 3 Golden Globes and a BAFTA, and was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Christopher Plummer's role as J. Paul Getty, eventually giving Kevin Spacey the final flip of the rod. In conclusion, All the Money in the World is a great film from Ridley Scott and has been one of his best films in a while, though the film suffers from controversy and an elephant in the room that is hard to ignore while watching it. The cinematography is great and gorgeous and makes the country of Italy look lovely and the country of England look dreary. The performances are great, especially from Christopher Plummer and Michelle Williams. It is highly unlikely that the Kevin Spacey version will ever be released, but until then, I'm quite satisfied with what we have right now. I give this film an 8 out of 10. This is Sean Bradley, signing out. I'll see you later. Bye.